come in. Have you been enjoying any new hobbies or any new interests? Because I feel like with coronavirus, a lot of people have a lot more time. And so like the topic has been, you know, what kind of new hobbies or interests do you have? But do you have anything that...
Actually, I've started 2 new things.
Oh.
One is I've started to play piano, or play piano. And the other thing is I'm just starting a photography course.
Oh, wow. So artistic.
I bought my first camera in Japan in 1981. I fell in love with it, and children have now decided it's time, now that I'm 61, I should go and learn how to take photographs properly. So they bought this course for me, which I was very happy about.
Oh, that's so sweet. That is lovely. Yeah, it's one of those, you know, hobbies or skills or interests that I think a lot of people are interested in, but they just feel like they don't have the time to really, you know, study and then master and whatnot. But the goal shouldn't be to master, I feel. It's just, you know, enjoyment. Yeah, that's great. Well, we do have early joiners right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you're having a good day so far. It's 8 p.m. in Japan. Or nearly 8 p.m. in Japan. But what time is it over there in Israel, David?
It's 2 p.m.
2 p.m. I see. And you said it was very hot right now, right?
Yeah.
Does it get humid? Because you know the summers in Japan, but is it as bad?
In the Tel Aviv area, which is on the sea, it gets very humid like Tokyo. And in Jerusalem, is high in the hills, it's far less humid, and in the evenings it's really very pleasant most of the year.
Oh, really? Okay. And you live in Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the summers in Japan?
I do.
But you were in Hokkaido though, right?
Yeah. Well, I was actually in Nagoya.
Okay.
For the best part of a year. And then every time I go to Japan now, I spend most of my time in Tokyo, you know, or some other places. So I lived in Hokkaido and I lived also in Nagoya, but most visits are actually to Tokyo and the area.
I see. Yeah. Do you miss Japan?
Yes, a lot. I managed to visit Japan twice just before the corona started.
Oh, that's good.
There in December and in January. There was a big show in January in Tokyo, so to get some sushi time in.
I guess the food, you know, cuisine-wise, it's very different. Israeli cuisine and Japanese cuisine.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm going to try to give another minute or so to welcome people, but this is a leader interview as part of the Sparkdojo series. And we are welcoming David. Thank you so much for joining us, David.
Thank you for inviting me. I am far from being a leader, but I will try to entertain you.
Oh, don't. You are a leader indeed. So to introduce David a little bit, David Oberman is VP of Asia at Innoviz Technologies in Israel. Can you tell us a little bit about your company, David?
Sure. Innoviz is a company making LiDAR. LiDAR is one of the sensors used in autonomous vehicles. So until now, most advanced driver assistance systems have been using cameras and radars. Most people already have cars with these in. And the last piece of the puzzle is the LiDAR. It's a sensor that sends out light and receives back light, so it can make a 3D image of the surroundings.
So it's just, so your company makes that piece of technology for vehicles, and are there other sort of applications for this?
There are many other applications. LiDAR can be used for mapping, for cities, can be used in agriculture, in marine, and we are already in contact with many different companies in Japan and worldwide for many different applications, but we are concentrating on the automotive because there is very big volume and very big need in this field.
I see. And yeah, you know, it's been recently, within the past, I would say maybe 5-6 years, this sort of economic partnership between Japan and Israel, a lot of Japanese companies working with Israeli companies to, you know, produce, innovate new things together. So I will definitely want to hear more about your thoughts in terms of that partnership too, because you are in a unique position. You stayed in Japan prior to this, right? You studied in Japan?
Yes. The first time I came to Japan was in 1981. And I lived in Nagoya. At that time, Japan was far more traditional than today. And foreigners were very rare. And it was an amazing, amazing experience for me to learn about Japanese society, Japanese economy, Japanese culture, to live with the people, to get to know the people. And I found that more than anything else, by getting to know the Japanese, I could actually learn a lot about myself and the differences and why I do what I do, why Japanese do what they do, the differences, and to understand two different cultures in a kind of comparative way was really fascinating for me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You know, I was born and raised in the US, and I didn't leave the US until I was 25. And once I did, and I moved to Singapore and then moved to Japan, you see a completely different culture, different sort of environment, and you're able to see your home country a little bit more objectively, I think, now that you're not immersed in that culture. So that realization is very interesting. But what was the biggest thing that you realized about yourself during your stay in Japan?
I think that actually I grew up in England, and I moved to Israel when I was 18. And of course, it was interesting for me to compare and contrast these two different countries and cultures. But I felt that Japan was so different. First of all, being an Asian country, and second of all, being Japan, so that I could see everything that I had experienced beforehand in a very different light. I was sure that I was doing everything the right way. And the Western way is the only way, if you like. And everything outside the immediate circle is always strange and different and second best. But then when you learn how things are done in the other country, then you really understand that actually there is no second best. It's all different flavors and different colors.
Absolutely. There is no best country. There's no second best country. Each country brings a different sort of, as you said, flavor to the table, different strengths, maybe different weaknesses as well. So that's very interesting. And you also served in the Israeli military, in the paratroops brigade, when you were 18. Right. So in Israel, it's mandatory service, is it not?
Yes, most people go to the army. Actually, men and women. And many people serve in units which actually give them a career for life. And this actually links up to the subject of Israeli technology and entrepreneurship, because one of the main streams of technology in Israel is connected in some way with the military. And in particular, there are two units in Israel in the army which have become the leaders for technology thought. The 8200 unit is quite famous worldwide. 8200 are the cybersecurity people. And, you know, they're famous for hacking into the iPhone and so on and so forth. And as we mentioned in our last call, actually, they've also provided tools to the secret security service in Israel, which are now used to track carriers of corona. And when people get sick, they can know which other people they've been near. Now, there's a big discussion, of course, about human rights and, you know, is this an invasion of human rights, even though it's helping people stay well? but that's the kind of thing they do. And then there's another unit called the 8-1. 8-1 is the unit that does the engineering. These are the guys who have to make new products yesterday, and they have to make them perfectly in order to meet the needs of the hour. So really kids who are taken to the army. And actually some of those people set up my company now.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much for jumping right into the topic, which is, you know, why is Israel so good at producing startups, innovative new technologies? You know, it's been called the new Silicon Valley, and you just mentioned something interesting, you know, the involvement of the military and the military training produces a big impact on this sort of culture of entrepreneurship and innovation. But does everybody join that unit, or is it?
No, it's only a few people, very limited number of people. Most people, you know, have to go to either combat units or to other units. Whichever way you look at it, it's a very good life experience for most people, because they learn to be independent. And when I compare people who went to the army at 18 and at age 21 said, okay, we finished our military service, we're now going to spend a year in Asia or South America touring, and then they go to study, I find that these people are much more mature than people in other countries who are still living at home when they're 29 or 30 years old.
Right. So it's 3 years? Is it 2 years or 3 years?
So 3 years for the men and 2 years for the women, but it depends, you know, which department you go to. If you go to the Air Force, if you become a pilot, for example, it's a 12-year stint.
Wow! Oh my God! Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Do you get to choose which one to join?
Before you join the army, you go to examinations and interviews. And for example, if you want to go to be a pilot, just for example, after finishing all your interviews, you're then called in. If you're selected, you're called in, and you have to do 1 week of, I don't think there's any other word than torture. You have to fill up sandbags and carry them up the mountains and down the mountains, and et cetera, for 1 week. At which point they understand who the people with the stronger characters are and the people who have better talent to become a pilot. And then those people that manage to survive this course are taken to the Air Force for the pilot's course. And during the 3 years of the pilot's course, only 1/3 of them actually finish the course.
Okay, so do you get to, it's like there's no selection process per se, but it's also based on your competence as well?
Yeah, first of all, they select the people they think might be suitable. Those 500 people go to the camp and they do all the exercises. And then about 150 people start the course, and maybe 40 or 50 will finish.
Oh, wow, I see. And I'm so sorry, everyone. Can you hold on for 1 minute?
Monday night.
I'm so sorry. This is the thing about remote working. Well, thank you. And what was your personal experience during your years of service?
So it really did help me gain many life skills. It really did help build a kind of a spirit of independence, a spirit of I can do anything. We had pretty hard stuff in the training for the paratroopers. Jumping out of planes was a picnic compared to some of the training that we had to do. And I got to know people from many different countries, including from Israel, of course, and different cultures. And you learn about different people and the places they came from. I think that was a very important point of being in the army, a kind of melting pot, where all the people come from all the different countries and they go to the army together, and after the army, they're Israelis.
You know, but, you know, I went through a similar experience in university where I would meet people from different countries, from different states, different backgrounds. And, you know, university is often that place where you really open up your worldview and you meet, you know, very, very, very different people, and you expand your perspectives. But I think it's different what you're describing. There's something more than just standard sort of university experience. And I guess part of that is training together. So it's not just about like academic performance, it's about physical performance. You seek weaknesses of people, right?
Right. Yeah, you see strengths, you see weaknesses, you all have to help each other. You learn to work in groups, and you learn to support each other. I think that there's a very basic sense of we need to do this for our country in order to protect our country, because unfortunately we are surrounded by enemy countries, and the Middle East is not an easy place. And so I think that that's something very basic. People come with a kind of a mission, a sense, something important. They're doing something important by going to the army. Even though they have to go, it doesn't matter. They still make a very big effort while they're in the army in order to become the best soldier they can, so that they can protect the country in the best way.
That sort of focus, that drive is something I never had at 18. And I think when I look at the education system in Japan and also in the US, you know, people aren't, they don't know what their goals are. They don't have like a future vision yet. They don't have that sort of uniform something to work towards. So to experience that at such an early age, and then spend 3 years in that kind of environment, fully immersed, and be surrounded completely by people who have that same ideas, same ideology, must build something in you that is tied to the spirit of creating something new, trying to run towards a goal that you have. And I guess that is a component of the spirit of entrepreneurism in Israel. But would you agree with that? Is that very
I do.
high?
Most definitely, but I think we have to differentiate between two different things. One is the spirit of the people of Israel, and if you like, the Jewish people. And I think, you know, this kind of, it's very difficult to describe the Jewish people's Gambaru spirit, it just in words, but the very unique kind of spirit, including the service in the army to protect the country. But on the other hand, there's a completely different thing which everybody talks about, which is the perhaps the most dominant factor, and those are the technological units in the army. And so those units I mentioned before, as well as some other places like the Air Force or the Navy, are places where new technologies are being developed. A lot of Israel's technological companies come from there.
So the unit itself develops it. It's not like they sort of contract with private companies to develop a certain technology, but they already have the people.
The unit itself develops technologies, and then those people who have been swimming in those technologies for 3 or 4 or 5 years then say, okay, I'm going out to the world. I already have a career. I already have a calling. I already know how to do some of the most difficult things in the world. And I can give an example. My son was in the 8200 unit for 4.5 years. And when he finished, I said, I'm very pleased you're finished with your military service. You can go to university. And he said, no way. If I go to university, I will lose all the advantage I have. Cutting edge anymore. Now I'm cutting edge. I can go to any company. I can get the best salaries in the market because I've been doing things that nobody else has been doing.
Yeah, why go to university when you've had your fill of education in such a specialized area that is very, very high value in the world. So did he move on to, did he join a company?
So he joined a company. His starting salary was 3 times my salary after having been in the industry for tens of years. And now he has his own company.
Wow, congratulations. What a cycle. So, you know, youths go into the military, and those with certain skill sets and, you know, who are selected, who can go into these units.
I'm losing you. Reina, we lost you.
Oh, can you still hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you again. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry.
I lost the last 1 minute.
Okay, sorry. So I was just talking about how it seems very like a system to take youths and, you know, get them to experience, you know, specialized training, you educate them, and they gain the know-how, they go out into the world and either join highly successful companies or produce highly successful companies that each produce highly successful and highly valued technologies. But is this something that you think, like, you know, Israel as a country, as maybe a government, sort of created for it to be that way? Or is it kind of like just naturally became this way?
I do not think that the government created it to be that way. It was necessary. And then, as a knock-on effect, people then had the talent to be able to set up technology companies. In the very stage, it was communications companies. Actually, my first company was a communications company. We were selling communications equipment to companies like NEC and Fujitsu, Japan Telecom, and so on. And later on, other technologies developed. For example, anything to do with computer vision, neural networks, and so on, as well as for anything connected to health, agriculture, and many other domains. It's important to also notice that a lot of the talent came from university with no to the military. For example, my last company, which is called Mobileye, set up by a professor from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. It was a company which set out to develop algorithms which will help tell the driver if the driver is leaving his lane or about to hit the car in front. And a small software company developed into a major company. It was bought by Intel for $15 billion just ago. And here there was no military technology at all. This was a professor of mathematics and computer vision who set up the company, working with some of his students and other algorithm developers, software developers. I think that the word software is very important. I think that Israel is very strong at software. And if we look to compare with Japan, I think that Japan is much stronger at the hardware side.
Yes, absolutely. That's very interesting. It seems like sort of, you know, different factors kind of align together to produce something very great and big. And would you say that the government is at all involved in making this successful in Israel?
Today, the government is.
Today it is.
Yeah. So in the beginning, when the country started out by exporting oranges, and this was our source of income from overseas, and then slowly moving into the technological fields, the government was not really involved. Recently, in the last 10 to 20 years, after the chief scientist set up an office to help startup companies and to provide funding, usually matching funding. So for example, you come to the chief scientist and you say, I have an idea. I already have a company. I want to do a project by myself or together with a Japanese company or a Chinese company, or there are many different funds, specific funds. And this is what I want to do. I need the funding. But if I manage to do this, then I can help Israel's exports. And then the chief scientist is very favorable and gives the loans or even grants to companies that are involved in different projects by themselves or with foreign partners.
So just to confirm, chief scientist, is that like a minister of what?
So it's actually part of the Ministry of Economy. It's just recently changed its name. It's now called the Israel Innovation Authority.
Oh, okay. So in the early days, the chief scientist would kind of pick and choose which companies to provide funds and grants for, and that sort of became a little bit more bigger and bigger each year.
That's
and
right.
And the government is very supportive of startups.
Extremely supportive, and of course all sorts of conferences and so on. The other thing that should be mentioned is the investment world. And Israel has been very fortunate to have huge investment, mainly from the United States, from different companies, venture capital companies from the United States. But then later on also from England, from Germany. In the last few years, the last maybe 8 or 10 years, Chinese companies have been investing very heavily in Israel. They invested in my last company. They invested in this current company. Very big investments. And Japan has started investing in Israel. Not as much as China, but it's growing. It's growing every year. And when people ask me to try to explain the kind of connection between Japan and Israel, I have a few points to make, few general points. First of all, as different as you could possibly get. On the cultural range or the business culture range, Israel is X and Japan is Y. So, you know, this is really very completely different.
What is completely different?
Well, starting from the general attitude to life, for example, Israelis are very casual about just about everything, including technology, including business, the way that they do things. They would rather go and make a mistake and then pick themselves up and start again than never have made that mistake. I would say that Japanese people are much more cautious. They want to do it perfectly the first time. So they put a lot of energy into getting everything perfect before they move on to the next step. So this is a big difference, you know, in the way that things are looked at. I think that if you look for Israel's strength, the strength is the entrepreneurial spirit. It's the ability to go from 0 to 1 or from A to B. On the other hand, has many strengths, many different strengths. Japan has the ability to develop and manufacture products. It's excellent at sales and marketing, quality control, service and support. All these things Japan is excellent in. And Israel is excellent in almost nothing. The only thing we are excellent is at getting good ideas and putting them into practice.
I see. I mean, that's why, you know, you hear of so many Israeli startups and companies. Oh, David, are you okay? David?
Sorry.
It's okay. We seem to be having all of the Zoom issues that you can possibly have. But anyway, I was saying, you know, you hear a lot about how the Israeli startup market operates, you know, a lot of, as you say, 0 to 1. So you get a prototype out there, get massive investments first, and then just sell it. And then use that as the fund to start another company and another technology. But you're saying that, you know, Japan, it's a little bit different. Japan brings to the table some qualities that maybe don't exist in sort of the Israeli business culture. So that's like a good synergy, good partnership, adding to each other's value, I guess. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say that's true, but I would say it in a different way. I would say that Japan has almost everything.
Oh.
And the one thing that Japan is missing is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to set up all these startup companies and to fail and to keep trying and to go through the very hard first stages of setting up a company with a new technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually Japan and Israel is the perfect marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's the perfect wedding of attributes, of capabilities. And that's why I'm a little bit upset, maybe even surprised that there isn't more cooperation between the countries.
Mm-hmm. Between the countries, did you say?
Between the countries, between companies from Japan and
Mm-hmm.
Israel. I'm surprised there isn't more general cooperation, there isn't more investment. I understand that the basic culture is very different.
Mm-hmm.
It really, it's not easy to form sort of a unified pattern of thinking between the two. But definitely, I think that each country can help the other very much.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something interesting, that Japan is missing that one thing, that ability to start something, that sort of spirit, that fire, not being afraid to make a mistake, to fail, to take some risks. But why do you think that is, aside from maybe just national sort of, characteristics, culture? Can you think of any other reasons that?
I think that here we have to look at the way that things are done in general. Mm-hmm. And I think that if, for example, if we were to compare Israel to a country which does not have any startups, mm-hmm. or very few, if you compare to countries like Malaysia or Indonesia or such countries, I think that it's 100 times more difficult to set up a startup company in a place like Malaysia or Indonesia, because you don't have everything around. Mm-hmm. You don't have the milieu. You don't have the friends or family who have done it before you. Mm-hmm. You don't have the people who can be examples for you. Mm-hmm. You don't have the government backing you. And it's like starting something in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. So while I wouldn't for a minute put Japan in such a category with such other countries, I think that the basic Japanese pattern of thinking is, or maybe it was until recently, if I can get a good job in one of those big corporations, then I'll be set for life. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, people change jobs more often and so on. But I think that the spirit of entrepreneurship is not inculcated. It's not inculcated from the home or from the university or from the business world. And when you look around, all your friends are working at different companies and none of them have started their own companies. In Israel, it's so much easier. Mm-hmm. My daughter's son has started a company. My own son has started a company. All of their friends from school are starting companies or want to start companies. And so it's the thing to do. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. It's not something that can start overnight. Japan's startup market, although compared to Israel or China or the US, is very, very small, but it has been growing at a more rapid pace in the past few years. And as you say, when there are more role models around you and success cases around you, and when starting a company becomes normal, it's a thing that many people do, then I'm sure the environment would be very, very different as well.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're past the 32 mark, so I'm going to start opening it up for questions for our participants. If you have any question that you would like to ask David, either about Israeli startups, tech, or anything that you would want David to answer, please feel free to submit questions. And we have a question now. Okay, so this question is about, okay, what do you think are the barriers between Israel and Japan, David? Have you seen typical communication issues between Israeli people and Japanese people, I guess, especially in a business setting?
I would like to relate to the business setting because I think the other setting is basically a tourist setting, and that's, I took my whole family to Japan and everything was fine, you know, that was, but in the business setting, I think that the Japanese side has a very strong emphasis on quality and support or service. And this is something that is not natural to Israeli companies. Neither quality nor the support issues. And it's not because Israeli people are bad or they don't want to do these things. We don't have a history like Japan has. And this is something that we are really missing in Israel. But on the other hand, the demands from Japan, especially for quality, for example, are thought to be over the top. I can tell you many stories about my work with Japanese companies. An example, we made some communications equipment for a Japanese company. And the power supply was, of course, attached to the equipment. And on the back of the equipment, we put a big sign saying the equipment must be turned off before attaching the power or turning the power on. And one day, after many years of the equipment working very well, a Japanese technician went into his data center and it was dark and he couldn't see what he was doing.
Oh no.
And he managed to put this power supply in upside down, which caused a power outage. And then the Japanese company said, how on earth could you have made a power cable which can be, in theory, inserted upside down and cause a power shortage? And we said, you know, but the guy should have been working in light and he should have read the sign. And why did he put it in upside down? And they said, all good arguments, but not good enough for us. We need you to redesign this power supply cable for all the equipment you've sold us, and we need a new one. This is kind of, you know, an example. So from the side, it was obvious that we needed to redesign the cable. And from our side, this is a totally outrageous demand, you know.
Yeah, if it works, then it's okay, is the side that I guess, you know, it's not just, as long as it works and it's functioning well, then why do you have to go through all the process, all the costs again to remake it? But for Japanese, maybe it's about, you know, perfect. We need it to be safe, perfectly safe, so that we can provide the best quality product. And this sort of like discrepancy in, I guess, priorities and values can cause some sort of communication issues at times. I think similar question here by Kaori. I think Japanese organizations have Kaizen or improvement spirit, improving the quality of products and services and learning from faults. How about Israel? Is there any similarity or difference with this sort of Japanese way of consistently improving things?
So I think this talks to the same kind of point. I think it's a natural part of the startup company's endeavors to always make a better product and always improve it, but not in the same way that the Japanese refer to Kaizen. I think it's more a process of brainstorming. It's throwing out ideas, and it can be done in the coffee corner or it could be done in the corridor, and people are constantly throwing out ideas. there's no limit really. It's not done in an organized way. There are no circles, to discuss this. It's kind of on the spur of the moment, and different people have different ideas, and then they're incorporated. And also the structure is not as hierarchical as Japanese structure or Asian structure. So anybody can come into the CEO's office without knocking and say, hey, I have a new idea, let's do this. That's fine.
Yeah, that's a stark difference. And, there are pros and cons to each. In terms of Japan, it's very organized. A lot of manuals, guidelines are set in place. It's very bureaucratic. The report line is very clear. Hierarchy is very clear. So people do their jobs, but maybe they don't go beyond their jobs. And on the other hand, on the Israeli side, it's much more spontaneous. A lot of creativity. It's a great place for someone who is creative to thrive. But at the same time, when it comes to like quality control or, making something more organized, creating more efficient systems for something, they might be lacking a little bit. So that sort of discrepancy is also interesting and complementary as well. And maybe that's why Japan and Israel make such a good marriage, using your own words. But one more question, David, by Sachi. Do you think Israeli education system or the education environment affects children's sort of entrepreneurship or their spirit to try to create new things?
So I would like to say one good thing and one bad thing here.
Okay.
The good thing is that Israeli kids are educated by their parents, by their schools, to be independent thinkers and to not be formal and to speak up for themselves, etc. On the other hand, Israeli kids are totally lacking in discipline. They are totally lacking in respect for the teacher, just another person. And, they're ready to complain to their parents if the teacher does the slightest thing wrong. So no respect for the teachers. And actually the education system in Israel, which should be really good, because we're supposed to be the people of the book, with a long history of learning and so on, actually it's very bad.
Really?
Yeah, it's really very bad. And the teachers are not paid well. So the best people don't go to teach. And the teachers go on strike just about every year at the beginning of the school season. And just when the school year is starting, that's the best time when they have the most leverage. They go on strike, better pay. And the same is true at the universities. They also go on strike at the beginning of the university year.
I did not know this. Wow. Okay. What makes it so bad? So, low salaries for teachers. Are there any other factors?
The general attitude, towards teachers. A teacher is somebody who gets a low salary and can't do anything else. So, so you don't have to respect them, kind of thing. I'm making generalizations, but I think these generalizations are very true on the whole.
Interesting. So it's not really, but the first point you made about, being able to speak up and sort of, at the same time, maybe disrespecting the teacher, but having that sort of confidence to do that as a child is very different from Japan, where, it's a lot more rigid. Teachers are to be respected. There are very strict rules and guidelines about how to behave, how to dress even. But it sounds like it's the complete opposite in Israel, where it's a little bit more free and, kids are running about and doing their own thing. Do you think that kind of contributes to a sort of more like passionate spirit or like a more ambitious spirit among younger children that then later they grow up into?
I do, definitely. And also the lack of discipline has its advantages.
What do you think are the advantages?
If you're taught to stand in a straight line, and bow or curtsy to the teacher or whatever it is, okay, that has its advantages. But there's also an advantage of understanding that at the end of the day, the teacher is just a person. Talk to them and you can voice your opinion, and Israeli people basically think, standing in a straight line or standing up straight or, doing all sorts of, in many Asian countries, all the workers stand outside the shop and bow and have a meeting and so on. When the Japanese lady at the entrance to the supermarket bows and says, "Thank you for coming to my supermarket," it's completely meaningless to Israelis. Why are they wasting money on this person who's just bowing to me as I leave the supermarket, and we feel a little bit embarrassed that anybody would bother to bow to me, we're totally lacking in all the formality and the discipline.
I guess it makes people sort of more honest as well, more raw as human beings. There's no sort of decorum or like a strict social rules to follow. So people are judged more honestly and evaluated and assessed more honestly as human beings than sort of their fitness to a certain societal model or social expectation. Fascinating, David, and we are running out of time, but I'm going to read out one last question, and then I'd like to close this webinar. What kind of advice would you give young professionals in Japan who want to become competent leaders in the future?
I think that there is one piece of advice that I can give them which has stood me in very good stead. Try something different. Go abroad, find a job in a different country, in a different company, preferably something that you're interested in. Go and work in a different country for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. We are beyond the English complex. We haven't got time to be worried about how we speak English. We will learn English on the job. I believe that immersing yourself in a different culture for 6 months, for a year, has huge value. If you cannot get a job, even working as a kind of, a student or apprentice job in a company, you don't have to get a big salary because you're getting a lot from working in that job. If you cannot get a job, then travel. Take a year, travel to different countries, different cultures. It will do the world for your language skills and for your people skills, and you'll see how the world works. And I believe that this will be of huge value to you. It was for me.
Absolutely, yeah. And it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning. When you came to Japan, you were able to learn more about yourself and learn different perspectives and worldviews. So thank you so much for such powerful words and for the interesting, insights into Israeli culture, business culture, military service, and so on. And thank you all of our participants for joining today as well. Yes, we have some comments, very inspirational. Thank you so much, says Leo. So thank you, David, so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated it, and you're wonderful. And thank you, Leo, also for inviting me to be on this webinar. And my best wishes to all the people of Japan who joined this session.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Have a great day, and have a great day for our participants as well. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.